the neighboring land of the vast land, with sand everywhere in the sky, and the deserted earth seemed to be abandoned by the world. Lin Hao was wearing a torn dress and half-kneeled on the sand, with blood flowing from the corner of his mouth and half a knife inserted into his chest. He gasped, staring at the approaching shadows far away. That was the chasing killer from Lin Zhao's sect, and he was so excited that he would die in this place where the birds would not shit. Lin Hao, run away, aren't you a family genius? Why are you lying like a dog now? The killer in the head sneered, and the long sword in his hand was approaching step by step with a cold light. Lin Hao gritted his teeth and his brain was full of the scene from 3 days ago. His brother Lin Xiao smiled and said to him, "Brother, the future of the family can only be handed over to me," and then stabbed him in the chest with a knife. The family was destroyed, the father was imprisoned, and the mother was lost. He was beaten to death and threw it to the most desolate border area of the King Woduo. "Lin Xiao, I won't die, I will definitely go back and step you under my feet." Lin Hao roared, smashing his palm into the sand, trying to get up. But the torn pain in his chest made his eyes dark and he almost fell down. "Are you still stubborn? Brothers, kill him and go back and win with young Master Lin Xiao." The killer swung his hand, and several people immediately accelerated their thrust, and the sword-light shadow headed straight to Lin Hao's brain. Lin Hao's heart sank, knowing that he really had no way out this time. He closed his eyes and his brain was full of past images, the family's glory, the days when he was called a genius, and Lin Zhao's faint smile. Hate burned his heart like fire, but he had no energy to stand up. At this moment, he suddenly felt a stinging pain in his left eye, as if something was going to be diamond out of his eye socket. He suddenly slid his eyes, and his left eye's vision became strange. The actions of the killers seemed to slow down, and he could even see the airflow that was scattered on them. That was the trunk of power. What a ghost thing is this? Lin Hao was stunned for a moment, but he couldn't think too much. While the other party slashed it, he instinctively rolled to the side and barely hid. A bunch of soil swelled up on the sand, and the sword slashed directly into the air. "Can you still hide? Come again." The killer snorted coldly, and another swiped over. This time, Lin Hao did not hide anymore. He stared at the obscure airflow on the other party's arm, and a thought suddenly flashed in his brain: this airflow is the way for the other party to take action. He slammed his feet and slid directly onto the killing foot, grabbed a handful of sand and threw it on the other side's face. Ah! The killer didn't expect this move, his eyes were fascinated by the sand, and he shouted and stepped back. Lin Hao took the opportunity to lift a sharp stone on the ground and smashed it hard on the other party's knee. He heard a click sound, and the killer fell down and made a pig-like cry. Several other murderers saw each other, their faces changed and they shouted and rushed up. Lin Hao gritted his teeth and swept his left eye over their bodies again. The air-flowing spines were as clear as a map. Although he was seriously injured, his brain was moving rapidly, relying on his inexplicable ability to dodge left and right, and he was reluctant to deal with it. "This kid is weird, don't hold back and kill him." A killer roared, and the long knife in his hand wrapped in a group of black gas, stabbed Lin Hao directly in the chest. This move was so fast that Lin Hao could not hide at all. The wound on his chest was shaken and blood flowed. He was forced to a huge rock and had no way to retreat. "It's over." Lin Hao felt a sudden heart. How could he really die here? But at this moment, his left eye suddenly felt a pain again. This time, not seeing the airflow, but a group of golden light appeared in the sand beside the huge rock, as if calling him. "What is this? No matter what, fight." Lin Hao gritted his teeth and suddenly reached out to grab the light spot. The sand was stripped open, and a strange stone as big as a palm appeared in his hand. The surface was full of incomprehensible traces, emitting a faint light. Just as he grabbed the stone, a warm current flowed from his palms to his whole body. The pain from his wounds actually decreased a lot, and even his energy recovered a little. Lin Hao was shocked, but he didn't have time to think about it anymore. The knife opposite was already close. He instinctively slapped the stone on the blade, and heard a bang sound, and the knife turned into 2 pieces. What? The killer was stunned, and the others also had a ghost expression. Lin Hao was also stunned, but soon a sneer came out of the corner of his mouth. "Aren't you going to kill me? Come on." He rushed up, and the stone in his hand seemed to have turned into the hardest weapon, and smashed it hard at the nearest killer. The guy didn't react and his brain was hit and he fell to the ground. "Run! This kid is not in a match." The remaining killers saw that the victory was not good, so they turned around and wanted to escape. But Lin Hao would not let them go. Under the field of left eye, their escape route was clear. He caught up with him several times, and the stone in his hand continued to smash down, and he forced all the last few people down. On the sand, there was a mess. Lin Hao gasped heavily, his body covered in blood, and he stood straight. He looked down at the stone in his hand and murmured, "What the hell is this? And my eyes, what's going on?" He thought that it was no coincidence. In his left eye, there was this strange stone head, as if there was something big secret hidden. And this secret may be the key to his turnaround in this world. At this moment, a sudden burst of footsteps came from the sand dunes far away. Lin Hao raised his head suddenly, held the stone tightly, and was ready to welcome the next wave of enemies. But what appeared in front of him was not the chaser, but a girl wearing broken leather armor. Her black hair was blown by the wind, and she was wearing a few warning points on her face, holding a short knife in her hand. Her eyes were as sharp as if she could see through people. "Who are you? Why are you here?" The girl's voice was cold, with obvious defense. Lin Hao was staring at the eye and looked at the other party. The girl's aura is not weak, but she has no desire to kill herself, so she should not be Lin Zhao's person. He gasped, stood up straight, and said, "My name is Lin Hao. I was thrown into this ghost place. As for why, do you think I seem to have a choice?" The girl heard it, her eyes swept over his blood and the few corpses on the ground, and her eyebrows slightly said, "You killed them? How many people can a severely injured person fuck these many? The atmosphere is so strong." Lin Hao was proud of his shoulders, but he didn't explain much. He didn't want to tell the story of his left eye and stone. The girl was silent for a while, as if she believed it, but she seemed to have no. She put away her short knife, walked to a killer's body, squatted down and flipped through the other party's clothes, and then snorted coldly, "These people have the Lin family's marks on them. What big shots have you offended?" Lin Hao felt nervous, and he didn't expect that this girl's vision was so poisonous. He sneered, "Big man? But he was a bastard who betrayed me. How did you appear here? This place is not easy to visit." The girl stood up, patted the sand on her hands, and said, "My name is Alan. This land of the world is my land. If you can survive, you have some ability, but if you don't leave, the Lin family will not give you a second chance. Your floor." Lin Hao raised his eyebrows and looked at Alan with a little curious look. This place is so deserted that there are no ghosts. How could she, a girl, dare to say that this is her floorboard? But he didn't ask much, and he really needed to find a place to hide from the dangers now. "Okay, take the way." Lin Hao pointed his head. Although his body still hurt so much, he knew that he could not waste it here. Lin Zhao's pursuit will definitely not end like this. Alan glanced at him, and without saying a word, he turned around and walked behind the dune. Lin Hao followed behind, holding the strange stone in his hand, and occasionally swept across the surroundings with his left eye. He always felt that there were more unknown things hidden under this deserted land. After about half an hour, the two of them came to a secret cave. The entrance of the cave was covered by a rock, and you can't find it if you don't look carefully. Alan skillfully pushed the stone open and signaled Lin Hao to go in. "Is this where you hide?" Lin Hao walked in and found that although the cave was simple, there was water, dry rice, and even a pile of burnt firewood. It was obvious that someone had lived in it for a long time. "Stop talking, please take care of yourself first." Alan took out a small bottle of ointment from the corner and threw it to him. "Spray it on, don't die here." Lin Hao received the ointment and heard the news. It tasted pungent, but it was indeed effective. He was not in a bad mood and directly applied the wound, which was so painful that he kept pumping. Alan sat aside and began to wipe his short knife, occasionally glanced at him, as if he was ready to move against him at any time. "Aren't you afraid that I'm a bad person?" Lin Hao asked casually after applying the medicine. Alan snorted, "A bad guy? More bad than the wild beasts in this world? I have seen too many people. You are more like a down-and-out guy. But if you dare to come, my knife will not be recognized." Lin Hao smiled. The girl's mouth was very hard, but her heart didn't seem so bad. He sat down against the wall of the cave, closed his eyes to rest. His brain was thinking about his left eye and the stone. The feeling of fighting was like a certain force was awakened, but he didn't understand what was going on. "Hey, Alan, do you know what strange stories are there in this world? For example, something that can make people stronger?" Lin Hao tried to ask. Aslan's movements were about to stop. His eyes became a little complicated. After seeing Lin Hao for a while, she said in a low voice, "This place is not simple. Many people say that ancient powers are hidden in the surrounding land, which can change their fate. However, most people who find this power die without even their bones. You better not think about it and live first before saying it." Lin Hao heard it and felt aroused. Ancient power? Change your fate? He looked down at the stone in his hand, believing that he might have touched something. At this moment, a low roar suddenly came from outside the cave, as if something was approaching. Alan suddenly stood up, held the short knife, and said in a low voice, "Don't make a sound, something is coming." Lin Hao also opened his eyes quietly, and his left eye instinctively swept towards the entrance of the cave. In the field, a group of blurry black shadows were approaching, emitting a heavy sense of threat. Lin Hao held his breath and leaned against the wall of the cave, staring at the dark shadow at the entrance of the cave. I felt a little nervous in my heart, and this sense of threat was stronger than those killers just now, like something that was not human. Alan next to him held a short knife. His face slowly sank down, and said in a low voice, "Don't be agitated, it may be the wilderness in the borderland. These things are not easy to mess with." "Wild beast?" Lin Hao murmured in a low voice, flying in his brain. In his left eye, the black shadow's silhouette gradually became clearer. It was not a human form, but a monster crawling with 4 legs. A dark red air scattered on his body, like a manifestation of power. He was surprised. This thing was definitely not simple, and it might be difficult to deal with the killers. The growl outside the cave was getting closer and closer, and the sound of sand and stone being trampled was clearly sounded. Alan made a silent hand, then approached the hole with his hands and looked out. Her face became even more difficult to see in an instant, and she turned to Lin Hao's voice, "It's a sand wolf, one of the most mates in the neighborhood. I can handle the single choice, but this time it's 2, it's so cumbersome." 2 heads? Lin Hao's eyebrows were snaking, and his wounds were still hurting. The battle just now had exhausted his energy. Now that the 2 monsters came again, it was absolutely deadly. But he wasn't the one who sat there and asked in a low voice, "Is there any way to lead them out? Or find a place to hide?" Alan shook her head. "The nose of a sliver wolf is more spiritual than a dog, and it is impossible to hide. The only way is to fight hard. While they have not fully discovered us, it is strong to start first." As she said, she took out a small bag of black powder from her waist and compared it to Lin Hao with a look. "This is a sliver powder, which can make them lose their direction in a short time. When I spread it out, you can find a chance to run. Don't drag your back legs." Lin Hao was slightly slapped. Although he was unhappy and was said to be dragging his legs, he also knew that his current situation would not be of any kind. However, he was still holding the strange stone in his hand. The warm current regained his energy and said he might be able to be put on the stage. "Are you ready?" Alan asked in a low voice, a tight look in his eyes. "Come on." Lin Hao gritted his teeth, stood up with his left eye towards the entrance of the cave, trying to capture the movement of the 2 split sand wolf. Alan stopped talking and shook his hand suddenly, and the packet of black powder was sprinkled directly outside the hole. Immediately, a low roar came from outside, and 2 large wolf-shaped monsters rushed out of the sand. Their body was twice as big as ordinary wolf. They had fangs, red eyes, and violet breaths on their bodies. The powder flew in front of them, and it really made their movements come to an end, starting to turn around in a mess, as if it had lost its goal. "Just now, go!" Alan shouted softly, and took the lead in rushing out of the hole, with a short knife in his hand, aiming directly at the neck of one of the wolf. Lin Hao didn't stand there either, and followed him tightly. Although every step he ran was so painful, he knew that stopping would be a dead end. Alan's speed was amazing. With a flash of short sword, he had already broken the head of the first wolf and blood sprayed out. The wolf let out a silent howl, turned around and slapped Alan with its claws. Alan hit from one side, and then stabbed another backhand, stabbing the wolf in the eyes, making the action clean and neat, not like a girl at all. The other wolf also came over the spirit at this time, and his red eyes locked Lin Hao and roared and swung over. Lin Hao's heart sank, and his left eye quickly swept over the other person's body. The dark red air currents were clearly visible, showing the path of this blow. He didn't dare to take it head-on, and suddenly rolled to the side, sweeping his wolf claws over his shoulders, causing a stinging pain. "Die it, this thing is too fast," Lin Hao said with a low voice, and when he got up, he had already tightened the strange stone in his hand. When he looked back, Alan was already fighting with the first wolf, and he was completely reluctant to come to help him. He gritted his teeth and decided to rely on himself. The wolf came again, Zhang Kai's bloody mouth, and the smelly breath came over his face. Lin Hao suppressed the fear in his heart, and his left eye locked the airflow on the other side's body tightly, and found that there would be a moment of empty space after its front paw attacked. He felt weak and did not retreat and turned around. He directly rushed to the bottom of the wolf, and the stone in his hand hit its abdomen. Bang! With a slight roar, the wolf was smashed and wailed, his body tilted, almost overturning. Lin Hao took the opportunity to catch aside, panting heavily, and felt that the bones in his body were almost disintegrating. However, he found that the power of this stone was even greater than he thought. The attack just now seemed to have some strange power, which directly caused the wolf to suffer internal injuries. This thing is indeed not simple. Lin Hao looked at the stone in his hand, his eyes flashing with a hint of excitement. But he didn't have time to think about it. The wolf had already stood firm again and roared and rushed in again, faster than before. At the same time, Alan was in a difficult situation. Although she injured the first wolf, the other party had strong vitality and forced the injury to resist. Her claws and teeth kept approaching, which made her unable to resist. She glanced at Lin Hao and shouted, "Hey, can you still hold it? Don't die." "Don't worry, I can't die." Lin Hao gritted his teeth and replied, and his brain flew quickly. He knew that fighting hard was not the way, he had to think of a smart way. His left eye swept over the surrounding terrain and suddenly noticed that there was a sand pit nowhere, with a golden light emitting from it, as if it had some contact with the stone in his hand. "Try it." Lin Hao was ruthless and ran towards the sand pit, shouting, "Alan, I have a way to hold your head." "Are you crazy? Let's run away." Asen slammed the wolf claws and slammed it, but he still gritted his teeth and held it up, and he didn't let the wolf rush to chase Lin Hao. Lin Hao walked to the sand pit a few steps, but couldn't see the cracked sand wolf chasing him behind him, jumped in and scattered the sand with both hands. The golden light became brighter and brighter, and finally, he dug up a piece of fragment similar to the stone in his hand, with strange patterns on the surface, scattering a faint heat. Just as he held the fragments, the stone in his hand suddenly shook, and the two pieces seemed to be attracted to each other, suddenly joined together, turning into a complete circular stone plate. "This is..." Lin Hao didn't have time to look at it in detail. A strong heat flowed out of the stone plate and instantly scattered throughout his body. The wound on his chest was actually at a speed visible to the naked eye, and his energy was mostly restored. What's even more remarkable is that his left eye's vision became clearer, and the airflow was no longer a blurry line, but was like a sophisticated map that marked all the weaknesses around it clearly. Roar! The cracked sand wolf behind him had already reached and slapped it hard. Lin Hao turned around suddenly, his left eye locked the trunk that fell from the other party's claws, and almost instinctively flashed his body. At the same time, the stone plate in his hand hit the wolf's abdomen. With an inexplicable force, the wolf directly smashed the wolf into the sand, and twitched for a few meters, and then it was no longer static. What? Aslan's eyes were almost glaring at this scene. She tried her best to force a wolf, but did Lin Hao, a guy who just picked up a single person? She gritted her teeth, stabbed the wolf's throat suddenly in front of her, and finally solved the opponent, and then ran towards Lin Hao with panting. What did you do just now? Alan looked at the stone plate in Lin Hao's hand, his eyes full of disbelief. Lin Hao grinned and wiped the sand from his face. It's good to have good weather, I've been swept up. But this place is not safe, so we have to go away. Alan clicked the head and asked no more questions. The two quickly cleaned up and headed towards the deeper border. Lin Hao held the stone plate in his hand, and he had a certain premonition in his heart. This thing was definitely not just a weapon, it might have something to do with the revelation of the borderland, and it could even help him turn over. After about 1 hour of leaving, the two of them came to a more desolate area, full of collapsed stone pillars and broken statues, like the descent of an ancient civilization. There was a pressure in the air, which made people slow down. Alan stopped and said in a low voice, "This place is called the Soul Valley, which is said to be one of the most dangerous places in the borderland. Many people went in and did not come out again. However, some people also said that there is a power that can cover the entire vast land of heaven." The power to overturn the vast land? Lin Hao's heart moved, looked down at the stone plate in his hand, believing that this thing could not be related to the Soul Valley. He raised his head and asked, "How much do you know? Are there any specific lines?" Alan shook his head. "I don't know much, I've only heard some stories, saying that there is an ancient forge in the valley, guarding a certain taboo power. But, the people who come in will die for a lifetime, do you definitely want to try?" Lin Hao sneered, "I've been forced to this point, are you still afraid of death? Besides, that bastard Lin Hao won't let me go, and I won't have the chance to revenge. Let's go, take the way." Alan glanced at him, with a little more approval in his eyes, and pointed at him, "Okay, you have a kind. But I'll say first, if you encounter danger, don't expect me to save you. Don't worry, I'm not going to be tired." Lin Hao grinned, held the stone plate tightly, and followed Alan into the Soul Valley. The atmosphere in the valley became more and more strange, and the voice seemed to be in low language, and you could hear strange noises coming from afar. Lin Hao's left eye swept across the surroundings and found that there was a faint light radiant on the broken stone pillars, which was somewhat similar to the traces on the stone plate. He became more and more convinced that there was no big secret in this place. Just as the two of them were deep into the valley, a sudden burst of stomping sound came from behind, accompanied by a cold killing. Lin Hao suddenly turned his head, and in his left eye, more than a dozen men in black were approaching quickly, each of whom was emitting a strong breath, far beyond those who had pursued the previous ones. "It's the Lin family's elite assassin." Alan's face changed and he said in a low voice, "Lin Hao, this guy is heartbroken and wants you to die." Lin Hao gritted his teeth and his eyes were cold. "It seems that he won't be over if he doesn't see me dead. Alan, be prepared, let's fuck them together." Alan pointed his head, with a short knife in his hand, and was full of fighting spirit. "Okay, I will kill one, and I will kill two." The group of assassins quickly surrounded him, and a masked man in the lead said coldly, "Lin Hao, you are so lucky, you can live to this day. However, today is your death date, and no one can save you." "Save? I don't need anyone to save me." Lin Hao sneered, his left eye swept over the other party, instantly locking the weakness of his body. The stone plate in his hand shook slightly, as if full of strength. He said to Alan in a low voice, "I'll leave you and you, don't let them join forces and find a chance to break out." "I understand." Alan responded with a sound, his body shaped like an electrician, and he led the lead in rushing toward the several assassins on the right. The short knife brought a cold light and directly teared open the opponent's defense. Lin Hao was no less. With the inside of his left eye, every move of the enemy was like a slow action. He held the stone plate in one hand and suddenly rushed towards the assassin on the left, living a flexible body as if he had not suffered any injuries at all. Whenever the opponent attacks, he can always make a prediction in advance, avoid it easily, and then use a stone plate to counterattack. Every time the stone plate is shot out, it carries a strange force, which can make the other party lose its fighting power in almost a single blow. What's going on with this guy? Speed and strength are not the same as each other. The head-in-chief's assassin's face changed, and he obviously didn't expect Lin Hao to be so difficult. He gritted his teeth and sniffed, "All the staff, don't hold back and kill him." Assassins come in swords and shadows form a network of death. Lin Hao and Alan were back to back, and they managed to seize the first wave of attacks. Alan's short sword was as fast as a flash, and every strike was directly at the critical point. Lin Hao used the inside of his left eye and the power of the stone plate to tear a bloody path. "Alan, can you hold back?" Lin Hao gasped. There were already a few new injuries on his body, but his eyes were still sharp. "Stop talking, fuck them and chat." Alan gritted his teeth and replied, his swordsmanship becoming more and more powerful. The battle lasted for a full moment, and 7 or 8 assassins were already lying on the ground. Although Lin Hao and Alan also lost their fortunes, they did not allow the other party to take advantage of it. The head of the assassins saw the scene and his face became increasingly difficult to see. He finally growled, "Get away. This guy is weird. Let's report it to a few when he goes back." The remaining assassin heard the order and quickly retreated and disappeared into the sand at the entrance of the valley. Lin Hao looked at their left backs, wiped the blood from his face, and sneered out of the corner of his mouth, "Lin Xiao, are you so capable? Wait, I will make you regret it." Alan leaned against a stone pillar, gasped and glanced at Lin Hao, "You guy, are really capable." However, since Lin Xiao sent a talented man, he showed that he no longer planned to leave you a way out. "What are you going to do next?" Lin Hao looked down at the stone plate in his hand, his eyes fixed. "Next? Of course, I am figuring out the secret of this place. The more Lin Xiao wants me to die, the more I will live and become stronger, and then go back and step him under my feet." Alan hummed, and said nothing more, but just wiped the knife silently, with a little more complicated look in his eyes. The two of them took a break and continued to walk towards the depths of the Soul Valley. The breath in the valley became more and more distant, and the light on the broken stone pillars became more and more obvious. Lin Hao conceived that they were getting closer and closer to the so-called Tag Power. And just behind them, in the sand at the entrance of the valley, a pair of cold eyes were staring at them, as if they were ready to launch a fatal blow at any time. Lin Hao and Alan stopped walking deep in the Soul Valley. The surrounding stone pillars emitted a faint light, and there was an indescribable pressure in the air. Lin Hao looked down at the stone plate in his hand. Although the battle just stopped Lin Xiao's assassin, he was not at all relaxed. Lin Xiao, the guy sent by him, became stronger and stronger, indicating that he was already heartbroken and wanted to kill himself. "If you don't speed up your pace and find out the secret of Soul Valley, you might really fall into it next time. Hey, are you sure there is any taboo power here?" Alan rubbed the blood on the short knife and glanced at Lin Hao, with a few doubts in his language. "I don't want to go with you for a waste," and then was caught up by Lin Xiao's people and chopped into meat sauce. Lin Hao sneered and slapped the stone plate in his hand. "Look at this thing, you have seen the battle just now. I would have hung up without it. This thing must have a connection with the light in this valley. I am catching something hidden here that can make me turn over. If you don't want to follow, go back, I won't slap you." Alan hummed and inserted his short knife back to his waist. "Who said I won't follow me? I just remind you not to be too happy. There are no shortage of people seeking death in this world. It's so good to hear it. There are only a few who have really dug up the treasure, but a lot of people died." She decided to put it on and reiterated, "But your guy is so desperate that he might really get something." Lin Hao grinned, and stopped talking, lifted his feet and continued to walk into the valley. As the left eye swept around, the light on the stone pillars became more and more obvious, and you could even see some strange runes, exactly like the traces on the stone plate. He became more and more convinced that this Soul Valley was definitely the key, and it might be the starting point of his reversal. After about half a time, the land gradually became lower and a huge ruin appeared in front of him, like the skeleton of an ancient temple. There is a broken sacrificial fort in the center, filled with dense runes, scattering a scattered wave. Lin Hao's left eye swept over, and the air around the sacrificial fort seemed to be twisted, and you could even see a vague flow of air, gathering into a huge whirlpool above the sacrificial fort. This place is not right. Alan held his eyebrows, his hand pressed on the short knife, and his eyes swept around with vigilance. I feel something is watching us. Lin Hao pointed the head, and he also felt the same way. The feeling of pressure from being watched made his hair stand up all over his body. However, the stone plate in his hand suddenly began to tremble slightly, as if responding to the waves of the sacrificial priest. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "No matter what, it's coming, it's not reasonable to retreat. Aslan, please stare at the surroundings and I'll go and see the sutra." "Okay, but don't expect me to be a nanny. Be careful." Alan didn't say anything, but he still held the short knife tightly and stood aside to guard. Lin Hao took a deep breath and approached the fort. With every step, the trembling of the stone plate became even more obvious, and even a low voice came from the sound of the bird, like an ancient lowly word, which directly dipped into his brain. His heart tightened, and his left eye locked the runes on the fort, trying to see the direction of the airflow clearly. Suddenly, the light in the center of the sacrificial supreme flashed suddenly, and an invisible force hit his chest directly, causing him to take a few steps back. "Lin Hao, what's wrong with you?" Alan immediately rushed over and held his shoulder. "It's okay. There's something strange here." Lin Hao gasped, wiped his sweat, his eyes brighter and brighter. Although he was shocked, his left eye clearly captured that there seemed to be a secret entrance hidden in the vortex in the center of the sacrificial storm, and the airflow was flowing from there. He gritted his teeth and said, "I saw an entrance, right in the middle of the sacrificial palace. We have to go in and take a look." "Entry? Are you sure you're not dazzled?" Alan looked at the fort suspiciously, and obviously he didn't see anything famous. "Believe me once, it's absolutely right." Lin Hao didn't explain much, and walked straight to the center of the sacrificial priest, lifting up high, whirling the group's airflow. As the stone plate approached, the vortex suddenly accelerated and a dark blue light shot out, directly covering Lin Hao and Alan. The next second, the two of them looked dark, and the whole person seemed to be sucked into a bottomless and deep penis. When they squinted their eyes again, they were already standing in a completely different space. There was no darkness around, and there were cold stone slabs under the feet. There were a few faint lights everywhere, like stars. Lin Hao was shocked. When his left eye glanced over, he found that those lights were not stars, but manifestations of some kind of power, each of which was scattered with powerful waves. "What kind of ghost place is this?" Alan held the short knife, with a slight anxiety in his voice. "How do I think? We were cheated in." "Don't panic, this place should be the core of Soul Valley," Lin Hao said in a low voice, and the stone plate in his hand was still shaking, as if guiding something. He walked towards the nearest light spot as he waved the stone plate. As the distance narrowed, the light gradually revealed its true face. It turned out to be a floating crystal, sealed with a group of flowing energy, dissipating a palpitations. This thing should be the forbidden power in the forbidden world. Lin Hao's eyes lit up, and he reached out and wanted to touch it. But at this moment, Alan next to him suddenly grabbed him and shouted, "Don't be upset. I feel wrong, there is a killing atmosphere around this." Before the words finished, the air around the crystal stones suddenly twisted, and several black shadows emerged from the darkness and rushed into the two. Lin Hao glanced at his left eye and found that these black shadows were not humans at all, but guardians of some kind of energy condensed, with speeds far away, each of which was scattered with the power that could crush ordinary people. "Good come." Alan reacted very quickly. With a flash of the short sword, he directly faced a black shadow. The sword light and energy collided, and a sharp bird appeared. Lin Hao was not idle either. He held the stone plate in his hand, locked the weakness of another black shadow in his left eye, and smashed it suddenly. the stone plate carried a strange force and directly smashed the black shadow and turned into a group of black fogs to dissipate. These guys are not strong, but they are large in number. Don't fight, keep me from getting crystal stones. Lin Hao shouted and rushed towards crystal stones. Alan gritted his teeth and followed, and the short sword danced tightly, so he helped him to stop several attacks. Just as Lin Hao was about to touch the crystal, a stronger black shadow suddenly emerged from the darkness, so fast that his left eye could almost catch it. It slapped Lin Hao's back with one claw, carrying the power that was enough to tear the steel. Lin Hao's heart sank, and he couldn't hide, so he could only bear it. He suddenly turned around and held it in front of him with a stone plate. Bang! With a loud bang, Lin Hao was shocked and flew backwards, and fell heavily on the stone slab, with a silk of blood spilling out of the corner of his mouth. Although the stone plate was not broken, the light on it dimmed a lot, and it obviously endured a huge pressure. The black shadow didn't stop and roared and came again. His atmosphere was stronger than before. Lin Hao, hold it! Aslan saw the scene and rushed over. The short knife stabbed the black shadow hard, trying to attract its attention. But the black shadow was not moved at all, and his goal was directed at Lin Hao, as if he was so excited that he wanted to stop him from taking away the crystal stone. Lin Hao bit his teeth tightly and stood up with great force. The wound on his chest teared up again, causing him to sweat coldly. He knew that if he couldn't handle this blow, he might really have to explain it here. But his brain suddenly flashed over Lin Zhao's faint smile, and his family's worries were as shattered as fire. Hate was burning all over his body. I won't die here. Lin Zhao, I must go back and step on you under my feet. Lin Hao growled, and his left eye suddenly stinged. This time, it was not that he saw the airflow, but that the whole vision turned bloody. The weakness of those black shadows seemed to be infinitely amplified, and even the source of their power was clearly visible. He moved his heart, held the stone plate tightly, and suddenly rushed towards the black shadow, without retreating and turning back. Looking for death. The black shadow seemed to growl and slapped his claws hard. But Lin Hao did not take the lead this time, but instead slapped the guidance of his left eye, flashed his side and directly behind the black shadow, and the stone plate smashed hard at the core of its power. Only a blind sound was heard, the black shadow screamed, and the whole body burst and opened, turning into countless pieces scattered. How did you do it? Alan was stunned and stopped the short knife in his hand. Don't ask, get something first. Lin Hao gasped, and had no time to explain. He stepped to the crystal stone in a few steps and reached out to grab it. The moment the crystal stone was bought, a cold energy penetrated his body, as if it was directly drilling into the bone marrow, making him unable to help but fight the cold. But immediately, this energy turned into a warm current and merged with the power of the stone plate. His left eye vision was upgraded again, and he could even see more crystals hidden in the darkness farther away. This place is indeed a treasure house. Lin Hao was delighted, but he also knew that he could not stay for a long time. Although the shadows were solved several times, there were more threats approaching in the darkness far away. He turned to Alan. We have to go away tightly after taking this thing, it's not safe. Alan pointed the head and quickly solved the last few small shadows, and the two quickly retreated back to the entrance. As the light of the stone plate shone again, their eyes flashed and they returned to the sacrificial for the Soul Valley. There was still the ruins around, but the pressure in the air clearly decreased. What is that just now? Is the illusion or real? Alan gasped, still not understanding the experience just now. No matter what it is, as long as the things you get are real. Lin Hao looked down at the crystal in his hand and smiled. He could feel that the power of this crystal had merged with the stone plate, and the power in his body was much stronger than before. The left eye's insight ability has improved by 1 file. Now even if there is another wave of assassins, he is confident of facing a head-on battle. However, the two of them had no time to catch their breath. A quick horse hoof sound suddenly came from a distance, accompanied by the sound of killing, as if a large group of people were approaching here. Lin Hao's face darkened, and his left eye swept over and found that in the sand far away, dozens of soldiers were quickly coming, and the flag on the head was the Lin family's mark. Lin Hao, such a bastard, is really a chance to not breathe. Lin Hao gritted his teeth and said to Alan in a low voice, "It seems that you can still hold on if you fight for another game?" Alan hummed and moved his wrist. "When I go, my knife has not stopped, I will cut as much as I come." Lin Hao clicked his head, held the stone plate and crystal, and prepared to fight. But he knew in his heart that this time the person who came was not an ordinary assassin, but the regular troops under Lin Hao, and his strength was definitely not comparable to those who had been before. He must fight quickly, otherwise it will only be more troublesome if he delays for a long time. Soon, the group of riders approached, and a man who was like a soldier stopped the horse and looked at Lin Hao coldly. "Lin Hao," young man said, "if you don't die, he will not sleep well. Today I brought 50 elves and there are continuous support troops, you will be unable to fly. It's hard to fly with wings. I want to see if you have the ability to make me unable to fly." Lin Hao sneered, and his left eye swept over the other party, instantly locking the weaknesses of several key characters. He said to Alan in a low voice, "I'm the front, you go to the side, don't let them surround." "I understand." Alan's figure flashed, and he had already shrunk to the side. The short sword brought a cold light and directly cut into the side of the soldiers. Lin Hao rushed directly to the army, and the stone plate in his hand burst out with a ray of light, which was several times stronger than before. With his left eye, every move of the other party was invisible. After a few steps approaching, the stone plate smashed hard at the other party's horse. The war horse made a sound of sadness, and was directly smashed to the ground, rolling down the wolf's ground, and his face changed drastically. "How could this kid be so strong?" The soldier growled, pulled out the long sword, and led several sluts to Lin Hao, trying to counterattack. But Lin Hao didn't give them any chance at all. His left eye locked their cracks, and the stone plate continued to smash them out. Each shot was powered by the crystal, and he forced several people to vomit blood and fell to the ground. "Waste! Come on me and kill him!" The army roared in a hurry, and the remaining soldiers rushed in, and the long gun and the bow and arrows attacked Lin Hao like a tide. Lin Hao gritted his teeth. Although he could see the attacking zombies clearly with his left eye, there were too many people, and a few more scratches on his body soon appeared, and blood flowed out. "Lin Hao, hold on, I'm here." Asen killed him from the side, and the short sword joined several soldiers to help Lin Hao divide the pressure. The two of them were back to back, with each other's attacks on each other. Although they were swaying, they did not allow the other party to take advantage of it. At this moment, Lin Hao's left eye suddenly hurt. In his sight, a strange airflow spread on a wrap on the military body, as if something important was hidden. He moved his heart and rushed over, and the stone plate slammed hard at the other side. He caught the army off guard and was smashed back, and the package on his waist fell to the ground. Lin Hao picked up and looked open. There was a secret letter inside, which read the content of Lin Hao and the Empire's high-level transaction. In order to change support, Lin Hao actually sold the resource information of the borderland to some of the great figures in the Empire, and even promised to use Lin Hao's life as a code. "Lin Hao, you bastard, really not just want to kill me?" Lin Hao gritted his teeth, his eyes were cold, he stuffed the secret letter into it, and he growled, "Alan, fuck this helper, let's go back and fight back. I've wanted to fuck you for a long time." Alan grinned, and the short knife rose again, full of fighting spirit. Lin Hao no longer retained it. The power of his left eye and stone plate exploded with all his might, and he forced Alan to kill a bloody path from the encirclement. The military situation was not good, and he fled with the murderous man, Emperor Ma, leaving behind a ground body. Lin Hao looked at their backs, wiped the blood from his face, and sneered out of the corner of his mouth, "Lin Hao, this is just the beginning, you can wait." Alan leaned against the side and gasped, glanced at the secret letter in Lin Hao's hand. "Can this thing let Lin Hao go without eating, right?" "Of course." Lin Hao pointed his head, and the fire of revenge was ignited in his eyes. "This letter is his handle. We have to go back to the inner world, find some allies, and expose this. I want him to know what the price of betraying me." The two of them took a short rest, took secret letters and crystals and quickly left the Soul Valley and headed towards the inner world. Lin Hao and Alan all the way, killing the lords from the border to the inner world, holding the secret letter that could kill Lin Xiao, and the flame of revenge was burning in their hearts. After months of potential and contact, they finally pulled up a group of dissatisfied resistance against the Empire and Lin Xiao, forming a rebellion army that cannot be underestimated. Among these people are descendants of the noble clan who are forced by the Lin Xiao family, as well as wandering warriors from the border areas, and even those who are not in full swing for corruption in the imperial army. They gathered under Lin Hao's flag for only one goal: to overthrow Lin Xiao and his backing and rebuild the order of the vast land of heaven. On this day, the rebel army finally approached the core of the empire, the imperial capital Tianyuan City. The city wall is as high as a mountain, and the Iron Army is surrounded by the city gate, with black pressures, and the battle flags and keys are in full swing. Lin Hao stood in front of the army, wearing a war armor, and was stained with the battle trunk. He held the stone plate that had merged with crystal stones. His left eye swept over the weakness of every defender on the city wall, and a sneer came out from the corner of his mouth. "Lin Xiao, today's your end," he murmured softly, his voice filled with uncontrollable hatred. Alan stood beside him, with a short knife in his hand, his eyes were as sharp as a horn. "Hey, don't be ruthless, this city wall is not paper paste, and the Iron Army is not vegetarian either." "Are you sure?" Lin Hao snorted, his eyes calmed down. "Are you sure you have to go in today? I have been waiting for this day for too long, and no one can stop me." He turned his head and shouted to the deputy behind him, "Send the order, the entire army is ready to attack and take down the city gate. Who dares to retreat, and the military will be detained. Get orders." The deputy clasped his fists and quickly conveyed the orders to resist the war between the army, and his military spirit was high and high. On the wall, an Iron Army leader looked down below and saw Lin Hao's figure. His face changed slightly, and he immediately sneered, "Lin Hao? A waste that has crawled out of the borderland, dares to challenge the imperial capital? Brothers, prepare bows and arrows, give them a look." The sound just fell, and thousands of arrows were rising from the city, and the rain of arrows rushed towards the rebel army like locusts. Lin Hao swept his left eye and the arrow's trunk was clearly visible. He suddenly lifted the stone plate and shouted, "Defend the shape of the stylus, the top of the shield." The rebels quickly formed a shield and forced the first wave of attacks. Only a few people were injured, and the military's energy was not reduced at all. "Pull!" Lin Hao rushed to the front and grabbed the city gate with his fine sword. His left eye locked the destruction of the defenders of Dingchengmen. Every time the stone plate was swept out, it carried the power of crystal stones and broke a bloody path. Alan was tightly sternly, with a short sword as flash, and he took the lead in the defending army. The two of them cooperated tacitly and approached the city in the rain of arrows. How could this kid be so strong? The leader on the head of the city saw the situation, his face was blue, and he gritted his teeth and ordered, "Press the heavy crossbow, aim at Lin Hao, and shoot him." Several huge heavy crossbows were pushed to the head of the city, and the crossbow arrows were as thick as arms, shooting straight at Lin Hao with the sound of breaking through the air. Lin Hao's heart sank. Although his left eye could see the spine clearly, the speed and power of the heavy crossbow were too shocking, and he could not completely avoid it. He gritted his teeth and suddenly held the stone plate in front of him, and took it hard. Bang! The crossbow arrow hit the stone plate and burst out a spark. Lin Hao was shocked and took several steps back, bleeding from the corner of his mouth, but the stone plate had no hair. Instead, the crossbow arrow broke directly. He wiped his mouth and grinned, "That's all that capable? Come again." This scene made the rebel soldiers feel energetic and shouted, "The king of the neighborhood! The king of the neighborhood!" The sound was like thunder, which shocked the head of the city guarding the army. Lin Hao took advantage of the opportunity to yell, "Brothers, if the city gate is broken, it is our world. I will be driven by it." The rebel army rushed towards the city gate like a tide, and under the leadership of Lin Hao and Alan, they forced the defending army to retreat. Finally, with a huge sound, a big hole was smashed into the city gate by a stone plate, and the resistance army bees rushed into the city, and the outer defense line of the imperial capital collapsed. Inside the city, the Iron Army retreated to the inner city and tried to make the final resistance. But Lin Hao did not give them a chance to breathe, and he rushed to the palace with the rebel army. His left eye swept across every corner, and no ambush or trap was hidden. The Iron Army's counterattack was powerless in the face of the absolute power. Finally, he stepped into the Imperial Palace Hall. In the magnificent palace, Lin Hao sat on the high throne in his Chinese robe, his face as deep as water. Several high-level imperial people around them looked different, some were shocked and some were angry, but no exception was all filled with anxiety. "Lin Hao, you really dare to come?" Lin Hao stood up, his voice was low, and he gritted his teeth in hatred. "I thought you had died long ago in the neighborhood. I didn't expect that you would be as hard as a cockroach." Lin Hao sneered and walked into the hall slowly, his left eye locking Lin Hao tightly. "Lin Hao, when you betrayed me and ruined my family, you didn't expect today, right? Today, I want to get everything that belongs to me. Take it back? Just hate you, a group of people?" Lin Hao snorted, and with a wave of his hand, several high-level guardians behind him were immediately rushed out, and his spirit was amazing, each of which was the top warrior in the empire. He said coldly, "I admit that you are more capable than I think, but you think you can turn the world with the broken tide of the border? Make a dream." Lin Hao was silent, and the stone plate was shocked and faced the front guard. His left eye had already seen the other party's weakness. The stone plate was smashed down with the power of crystal stone. He only heard a sound of shock. The guard was directly smashed and hit the hall pillar, fainting. In other situations of care, the complexion of the face changed drastically, but Lin Zhao's orders were not to be resisted and he could only come forward with a hard head. Alan was killed from the side, and the short sword was like a wind, helping Lin Hao to distribute the pressure. She fought and shouted, "Lin Hao, don't delay time and get rid of Lin Hao, these people will naturally collapse." "I understand." Lin Hao pointed his head, locked Lin Hao in his left eye, and suddenly rushed towards the throne. Lin Zhao's face changed. He obviously didn't expect Lin Hao to be so fast. He quickly pulled out his long sword from his waist and a strong aura burst out from his body. It turned out that he had not cultivated his body for many years. "Good, come, brother, let me see how many pounds you have." Lin Hao sneered, and the long sword carried a cold light, piercing Lin Hao's heart. Lin Hao flashed his left eye and easily saw through the sword's tread. When he flashed his side, the stone plate slammed hard on Lin Zhao's shoulder. Lin Hao reacted slowly, and he returned to defend and took a shot, but the power of the stone plate exceeded his expectations. He was shocked and retreated several steps, and the tiger's mouth was cracked, and blood flowed out. "How is it possible? What is your broken stone head?" Lin Hao gritted his teeth, and a terror finally appeared on his face. "This is the power of the borderland. You will never understand the trash of a betrayer." Lin Hao roared, taking advantage of the pursuit, and the stone plate continued to smash, and each shot pointed directly at Lin Zhao's key points. Although Lin Hao is not weak in strength, under the inside of his left eye, every move he does is like a slow action, without any strength to help. The battle in the hall became more and more intense, and the rebels had retreated and began to suppress those high-level Imperials. Alan held a knife on the neck of a high-ranking official and sneered, "Don't move, otherwise you won't be able to keep this brain." Lin Hao saw that the victory was not good, so he finally panicked and gritted his teeth and shouted, "Lin Hao, do you really want to kill me as much as possible? We are brothers." "Brother?" Lin Hao heard it, and his eyes became even more hatred. "You stab me and kill my family, but I didn't think of these 3 words. Today, you'll kill me." He suddenly slammed out, and the stone plate slammed straight into Lin Zhao's chest. Lin Zhao's long sword broke, and the whole person was smashed and flew heavily on the throne, spitting out a mouthful of blood, and his breath was suffocated. Lin Hao didn't give him any chance. He walked up to him, stared at his face with his left eye and said in a low voice, "Lin Hao, the family's hatred, mother's misfortune, and father's hardship, I will all figure it out today." After saying that, he stepped on Lin Zhao's chest, and the stone plate was raised high, and was about to give him a fatal blow. "Wait, wait!" Lin Hao gasped, his eyes filled with fear. I can tell you a secret, the truth about the decline of the empire, and the whereabouts of his mother. As long as you give me my life. Lin Hao acted aloud, his eyes flashed with a silk silence. He hated Lin Hao to the core, but his mother's whereabouts have always been a pain in his heart. He said coldly, if you dare to cheat me, I will make you die even more. Lin Hao saw that there was a way out, so he hurriedly gasped, the resurgence of the empire has something to do with the land of the border. The power there is the ancient source of the purity. If you can control it, you can dominate the land. And the mother, she was seized by the high level of the empire and was in the secret fortress of the land of the border, as a code to study the source of the purity. After Lin Hao finished hearing this, his heart was shocked, and his left eye instinctively swept over Lin Hao, and found that he had not expressed any responsibilities this time. He gritted his teeth and finally put down the stone plate, but the force under his feet did not decrease at all. Okay, I will save your life at a time, but you have to take me to save your mother. If there is a little hypothesis, I will make you regret living. Lin Hao pointed his head and his face turned pale, and he clearly knew that he had no chance of turning around. In the main hall, the rebels were fully in control of the situation. The high-level Imperial empires surrendered, and the Iron and Steel army also laid down their weapons. Lin Hao turned his head and said to Alan, if you take people to watch these guys, I want to use the Eye of the Frontier to see if what Lin Hao said is true. Alan pointed his head and slapped his sword, signaling his subordinates to arrest the prisoner. Lin Hao closed his eyes, and the vision of his left eye expanded instantly. The power of the stone plate and crystal fusion gave his insight to a new level. He saw a secret fortress deep in the border area, which was indeed radiating a huge wave, and his mother's familiar breath. It's true. Lin Hao opened his eyes quietly, and a sense of determination ignited in his eyes. He turned his head to the rebels and said, brothers, the emperor is already ours, but this battle has not ended. I want to go back to the land of the world, rescue my mother, and control the source of the sky, and completely change the fate of this vast land. Do you want to fight me again? I wish. The king of the neighborhood. The crowd shouted loudly, and the sound was shocking and the war was boiling. A few days later, Lin Hao led the elite troops and escorted Lin Hao, and set foot on the land of the border again. With the guidance of their left eye, they quickly found the secret fortress. Although Guardian is powerful, he has no strength to resist Lin Hao's absolute strength. Finally, he entered the fortress and found his imprisoned mother. Looking at the mother's white face and the scars that were covered with body, Lin Hao's eyes turned red and almost fell down. How, you are still alive? The mother opened her mouth weakly, her eyes filled with relief. Mom, I'm late, but from today on, no one can hurt you again. Lin Hao gritted his teeth, lifted his mother's back, and turned his head to look at the source of the sky in the center of the fortress. The energy vortex dissipated with unrestrained power, like the fate of the entire mainland. He let Alan and his subordinates take care of their mother and go to the whirlpool. After sweeping over his left eye, every energy jungle in the vortex was clearly visible. He could feel that as long as he controls this force, he could become the real king of the great land of heaven. With stone plates and crystal stones in his hand, he suddenly reached into the vortex, and a powerful force instantly swept into his body, as if the whole world was in his palm. From today, I, Lin Hao, is the king of the border and the master of the great land of heaven. Lin Hao roared, and a golden light burst out from his body. The vision of the left eye expanded to the entire great land. The ups and downs of every empire and the ups and downs of every battle cannot escape his eyes. A few months later, Lin Hao led the rebel army, finally liquidated the empire's corruption and rebuilt a new order. Lin Hao was imprisoned and eventually was unable to be free as a proxy for betrayal. The power of the source of the sky made Lin Hao the supreme king on the mainland. He used this force to calm the war, rebuild the borderland, and turn that wasteland into a new land of hope. In the Tianyuan city of the imperial capital, the new palace rose from the ground. Lin Hao stood at the highest point, overlooking the Wanli River and mountains. Beside him was Alan and his mother, and there were all the soldiers who followed him. He whispered a smile on his lips and murmured, Lin Hao, Did you see it? This large area is mine. As the sun sets west, golden light fills the earth. Lin Hao's name is engraved in history, becoming an immortal legend of the great land of heaven. The waste that rose from the borderland finally stepped onto the peak of power, witnessed the rebirth of the empire, and won eternal glory for himself and his family.